So thank you for coming to the January chapter meeting of the California Native Plant Society Channel Islands chapter. This evening, our speaker is one of our CNPS Channel Island Scholarship recipients, Mary Cadogan. And she's going to speak about her research on Lupinus nipomensis. So Mary is originally from Westford, Massachusetts, and is currently a fourth-year environmental studies major at the University of California, Santa Barbara. So she's an undergrad, you guys. And she has worked as a restoration assistant for the Cheadle Center for Biodiversity and Ecological Restoration. And this past year, Mary conducted a seed predation and herbivory study for the Nipomo Mesa lupine, Lupinus nipomensis. And she set up motion sensor cameras adjacent to caged and uncaged plots containing lupin seed and documented the range and abundance of insects and small mammals. And her results will help management make future decisions on the most efficient methods and locations for planting lupin seed. And so, Mary, we're delighted to have you, and I will leave it to you now.
Hi, everyone. Just want to say thank you for having me, first of all. And so now I'm going to share my screen.
And everybody, you can mute yourselves.
Can everyone see this?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, cool. So hi, everyone. My name is Mary Cadogan. Thanks again for having me. And so today I'm going to be talking about the study I've been doing for the past year, which is the Nipomo Mesa lupin seed predation and herbivory study. So the Nipomo Mesa lupin is currently listed as a federally endangered species, and this has been due to invasive grasses, a loss of dune habitat, and drought that has been limiting the lupin's range to only 2 square miles within a Guadalupe-Nipomo Dunes complex in SLO County. So the purpose of this study was to analyze the impact that herbivores have on the germination success of the Nipomo Mesa lupin as part of UCSB's Cheadle Center for Biodiversity and Ecological Restoration Population Enhancement Project, which has been looking to reestablish the lupin population. So in the study, I looked at comparing herbivory activity between different planting treatments to help assist future conservation decisions. So the methods for this study were, I did a study at 2 different study sites, and they were part of the San Luis Obispo's Land Trust Kathleen Goddard Jones Preserve and the Black Lake Ecological Area. And so I set up motion censored cameras at 8 different plots, and each plot had a mesh seed box filled with 20 lupin seeds that was uncovered with sand in the area. And so I looked at 3 different treatments. So 4 of the boxes were placed in 10 by 10 cage plots that were caged around the sides but not over top. And 2 of these were placed at the KGGO site and 2 at the BLEA site. 2 of the boxes were then also placed near shrub vegetation in uncaged plots at BLEA. And 2 boxes were placed farther away from shrub vegetation in uncaged plots at BLEA. So the purpose was to see which plot would have the least amount of herbivory, because then this would, and see if this would allow for more germination. And so then the seeds were counted at the beginning and the end of the study. So part of this study was limited by camera efficiency, which is something that the Cheadle Center is trying to work with going forward. So the capture rate of the wildlife footage was reduced by SD cards filling up from wind footage super early, technical issues like cameras not working or not recording for the full 20-second time period, or camera delays. So here I looked at how many hours the cameras were placed and functional, and the capture time was the amount of times that animals or insects were actually visible in the footage. And so you can see that capture rate was below 0.5%. So this has definitely been limiting in how much we can understand the full effect of herbivory. So here, this is an image down below in the bottom left of what half a seed would look like. So this would be a sign of herbivory. And so this was the numbers of the seeds that were placed in the end of January. And then I did a count again in about the middle of May to see how many seeds were still remaining in the boxes. So you can see that of the percentage of seeds gone, that the caged plots showed technically the most amount of herbivory because it had the highest percentage of seeds gone. And then the uncaged near vegetation showed the next most, and then the uncaged far from vegetation showed the least most. And as I'll talk about later, the seed counting was definitely a little inconsistent. It could have been done more. And as you can see, some of the boxes would show that a lot of the contents had been blown out by wind. So that was definitely a factor to consider. So this is just a total box of everything that we saw on the site. And so I'll go more into depth about what all of this means. But as you can see, for the time of footage, that the uncaged far from vegetation had the most amount of animal and insect activity, and then uncaged near vegetation, and then cage plots, which is kind of opposite to what we were seeing with the seed counts. So a summary of the findings is that looking at the camera footage, there was evidence of deer mice, kangaroo rats, goldfinches, and California towhees foraging in the seed boxes. It's still hard to say if they were for sure doing that because you can't really see that close up. And then also there was the highest prevalence of rodent herbivory near shrub vegetation. And there was a higher prevalence of bird herbivory further away from vegetation. And then other animals that have been spotted on cameras were bobcats, skunks, lizards, deer, but these were mostly just passing through the air. And then birds and rodents were fully limiting herbivory. And then there was also evidence of a cottontail rabbit. Is my internet still working?
It went in and out.
Okay,
So we missed a little bit about the bobcats, skunks, lizards, and badgers.
Okay, yeah, sorry, I just got a notification about it. But okay, so the bobcats, skunks, lizards, badgers, and deer had no direct impact on lupin seed or plant herbivory, but were still in the area. The birds and rodents were still getting into the 10 by 10 cage plots, and there was evidence of cottontails foraging on an actual lupin plant. And there is a strong likelihood of herbivory from insects based on field observations when I was in the field, and also a lot of the seeds that I was looking at the end looked like they were hollowed out, so like something had dug into them, but it was too hard to tell from the cameras, so this would be an important thing to look at going forward. Hold on, sorry, it's not letting me. So this is just a graph of the uncaged near vegetation plots. So here you can see that there was a lot of cottontail rabbits, and a lot of them were mostly just passing through the area, but there was a lot of foraging going on outside of the boxes. And here you can see that there was foraging in the seed boxes from the deer mouse and the kangaroo rats, and there was a lot less presence of birds. And then this was the uncaged far from vegetation plots. And here you could still see that there were a lot of cottontails. And the biggest thing to notice here was that there was more bird activity and less rodent activity. And then in the cage plots where from the seed count, there was the most amount of herbivory, the only evidence of actual herbivory was from a towhee inside the box. And then there was a lot more insect activity in the cage plots. However, I marked the activity as unclear since it's too hard to tell what the insects were actually doing in the boxes. So here's just some footage that we captured. So on the left, you can see that this would be herbivory activity where a lot of the leaves and the buds are bitten off. And so this was likely from a cottontail. As you can see on the right, here was a cottontail chewing on an actual lupin plant that I was able to capture. And then over here on the left is a California towhee foraging inside the box, and on the right was a goldfinch. And then on the left was a deer mouse, and on the right was a kangaroo rat. So these are just some of the images that I was able to capture. And then I just included these for fun because I thought it was really cool to look at. I've never had the opportunity to see a badger, a bobcat, or a jackrabbit. So this was a really cool thing to see. And it was just nice to see that they were also in the area. So since the study that I did was new and definitely I had some key questions that still needed to be answered at the end of it. Another student is working for the Cheadle Center. His name is Kalen Campos, and he's using the motion sensor cameras to assess seed herbivory and seed predation like I did, but he's looking at the KG geosites and also at a different site, which is the Phillips 66 refinery site. And he was able to start earlier in the season and has been counting seeds more frequently, so weekly or bi-weekly. And that way he can get an average daily rate of seed predation and also maybe draw stronger connections between what animals on the cameras are actually eating the seeds when he goes and looks at them. And also they're assessing the potential role that the invasive veldtgrass cover might have on seed predation, if it's hindering or helping. And then so far, the results seem to implicate a higher rate of seed predation the further away from veldtgrass. However, there's still a lot more studying that needs to be done there. So yeah, it'll continue to be an ongoing study. I'm really grateful that I was able to start this project, and I've learned a lot. And I just want to thank everyone at the California Native Plant Society, and thank you all for listening. If anyone has any questions, feel free to let me know. Thank you.
Can I ask about the ants?
Yes.
You listed them as being prevalent. Did they actually impact the seeds at all? You know?
So I couldn't tell from the camera footage, so that's why I listed the activity as unclear, but it was still nice to see that they were there. When I was in the field actually looking, like counting the seeds or collecting the cameras, I would notice that ants would be going in the boxes and kind of going on the seeds. So it's still unclear. That's why I think it would be important to do some sort of insect monitoring to see that herbivory.
I'm curious how you would monitor insects. I don't think that your motion sensing cameras are going to be sensitive enough. So would you just sit there and take a look at them and watch the bugs go in and out?
Yeah, I guess so. So that's kind of what I was doing when I would do seed counts, and say I saw a full remaining seed and I was in an area surrounded by ants, I would kind of like place, this was not as scientific, but I would place the seed out and see if the ants would go up and approach the seed, and they were. So you would probably have to do something like that and create some more of a scientific method to it. But yeah.
So you didn't take a survey of the different kinds of insects in the area?
No, I did
They're
not.
actually eating the seeds?
Yeah, no. That was just kind of seeing if they were like there, and they were being triggered by the motion camera. So anytime one of them entered the seed box and looked like it was kind of foraging around, I just included that, but that's why I marked it as unclear instead of they're definitely foraging or not foraging, because it's just unclear.
So is most of the seed predation after the seeds fall out of the fruits, or does it happen also when the fruits are still, kind of opening up and attached to the plants?
Well, the seeds that I was looking at were seeds that I had obtained from Wayne Chapman through Sieber that were just placed in the box. So they weren't necessarily around other plants that were laying seed or flowering. I would say that there was evidence of seed herbivory going on through the entire period of January to May. if that's what you were wondering. So that would be something to maybe go back and look at, but nothing that I noticed where it seemed that one time period seemed to have more herbivory than others.
I think you have a question in the chat
Okay.
from Cindy. She said the cameras are set to trigger with motion and temperature change. Therefore, detection of insects was incidental, or was it on a timed setting?
I don't think it was necessarily incidental. I would say that the motion cameras were definitely very easy to trigger to go off. That's why a lot of the footage that I looked through was just wind. Like if there were shadows moving, it would do that. So anytime there were insects, the cameras were capturing that. So it was definitely like on purpose that the cameras were doing it. I don't know if that answers your question fully.
Cindy, you can unmute yourself and ask a follow-up if you have one. You're unmuted, but we're not hearing you. Let's see, did she put anything else in the chat? No. Well, I have
So,
another one. Oh, go for it, Terry.
Can I just follow up? Sorry, Chris and I were discussing it. So I think there was a bit of a hint in there, maybe how you could study insects would be to put the cameras on a timer so that they would go off, say at the same time for just a few minutes to see if you could capture when, there might be insects in the area, and then follow it by time rather than by motion. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I just think that the biggest issue was that they're just so small that it's kind of hard to see actually what they're doing. Like if they're actually going up to the seeds itself or if they're just like in the seed box. So I would say that was more of the issue than them being motion versus time. So I think it would potentially have to be an in-person sort of monitoring, which may be tedious, but
so she
And
put a
so-
follow-up in the chat. She said, sorry, I can't get through by audio. Some cameras only trigger when there's a temperature and a motion difference. And insects would not set that off. Maybe these cameras are different. Also, your point that the insects are small is a good one.
Yeah, I'm not really sure about that. It seemed that they were pretty consistently being triggered by motion just by looking through all of them. Like in all of them, it seemed to be triggered by something moving. So I don't know, potentially. I do not remember the exact type of camera. I would have to go back and look.
I was curious about the caging of some of the, so when you said caged, they were the wooden boxes, but they actually had a mesh over them.
Yeah, so at the different sites that I went to, the cage plots were just 10 by 10 like wire casing around. So I'd put the small wood box in that just to see if it was limiting the amount that like rodents or other small mammals would be coming in, and it definitely limited like rabbits, but there were rodents and birds still getting in. And I think it'd be interesting to also look at the plots that had the cages over the top too, because then I think you would definitely get less birds at least.
So looking at the bigger picture, where do you see this fitting into sort of the, the bigger questions about, what's reducing the amount of seed that's out there, or the, ability of the lupin to be very successful in those areas?
Mm-hmm. So I would say that, and I'm curious to see what comes out of Kaylin's study this year. I think that the ones that were closer towards other vegetation definitely had a lot more rodent and like rabbit activities. So I would say that trying to place seeds maybe further away from, especially with the veldtgrass vegetation, that might be useful. So I don't know. I think there's still a lot of research that needs to be done just with the issues with the cameras. And also I think that collecting seeds more frequently will definitely make a larger difference. So yeah, and I would say last year the biggest issue was mostly drought with it seems like the lupins are doing a lot better this year so far based on the information I've received, which is good.
Were you counting actual seeds at the end, or were you counting plants that had germinated from the seeds?
No, it's just seed. So I counted the amount that were still remaining in the seed box. So if ones were missing, or if there were only half of shells or ones that had been hollowed out, I considered those as like either signs of herbivory or like gone. So however many were remaining, that means that they weren't like touched.
But then you had those ones that grew into little plants.
Yeah.
You didn't count those as successful seeds?
Well, those didn't germinate. The ones that were just in the boxes.
Right, but I mean, wouldn't some of them, the ones that were successful and germinated, count as seeds that weren't eaten?
Yes, but I don't recall any like new growth in the area around the boxes that we noticed.
Oh, you showed pictures of plants that the birds were eating.
Well, do you mean the cottontail?
No, you showed a pic. Yeah, right, the cottontail.
Yeah, that one had already been there. That was like a one that had been monitored throughout the whole season.
Oh, so it was a natural occurring one?
Yeah, because that one was a lot later on in its growth, I would say.
Yeah. So do some of them just get under the soil though? So you can't see them anymore?
Not in the boxes had mesh on the bottom that would have prevented the seeds from going further down. I would say that, yeah, the issue is that wind might have blown them a lot farther away out of the mesh boxes. So I would say that's why it's good that they're counting more frequently now.
Okay, thanks.
So there's another comment in the chat. Let's see. In fact, there's now two. So Cindy said that the slow chapter volunteers are going to be helping at a nature conservancy. No, sorry, to help the land conservancy of slow to weed around Nipomo lupin. And so this information will be fun to share with them.
Awesome.
And then we have another comment from John Chestnut. John, did you want to unmute yourself and speak to the group?
Not necessary. Thank you.
Okay.
Enjoyed the presentation. I'm glad there's new research being done on this plan. It's close to my heart.
Yes.
So his comment in the chat is, in my experience, lupine, Nipomo lupin populations vary by at least 3 orders of magnitude year over year, depending on the timing and the amount of rainfall, and the seeds are long-lived, and the seed bank represents multiple years of accumulation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so it'll definitely be interesting to look at the overall population enhancement study results between last year and this year, where they're doing the monitoring of the more established plots and seeing if this year's rainfall has been helping or drowning out potentially some of the lupins.
Does anybody else have a comment or a question? Nope. You sure? Does anybody have a comment or a question about anything else?
This is about the hike coming up in February. It's scheduled for. This is about the hike coming up in February. It's scheduled for February 25th. I just got news from the Nature Conservancy that they, because they have a project at the Hanson property southwest of Santa Paula, that we can't have the hike there until later in the spring. So I'll be looking at other places to hike instead for February 25th. And we do have a hike for March 4th already set at CSUCI. That's a Saturday.
Okay, thank you, David. I think there was another comment for Mary in the chat.
It could have been mine.
Yeah, Paul, do you want to go ahead and ask it yourself?
Yeah. And in a lot of the ecosystems, fire is a very important factor in a lot of the plants and the rejuvenation. And the area where you're working, I was wondering if it had any recent fires or anything. And then if there would be a lot of more, what do you call it? Plants that would generate more seeds, which would support more wildlife, and it would cause population blooms in a variety of, I guess, plants and animals. And I was wondering, was that any of kind of a consideration in the work that you were doing? As far as like, say, you're looking at the small limited area where it belongs, and I'm wondering if a fire, things like that would help generate the space that the plants were in, and then the animals scattering seeds, etc.
Yeah, I'm not familiar of any fires in the area within the last few years. I was mostly looking just at the herbivory and seed predation. I would say that it probably would have an influence just based on the amount of invasive grasses that were in the area as well, that have been kind of covering out the area that the lupin's been allowed to grow in. But that would be really interesting to look at. I'm not sure if anyone else is doing that type of research right now.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I liked your presentation. It's pretty interesting to see your approach and all the different things, that we're looking at, influencing of all that, the herbivation. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
There's another comment from John Chestnut. Fire is vanishingly rare in the Guadalupe Dune system, and the Phillips 66 site had a fire on a portion of the natural population in the early 1990s with no effect, positive or negative, on the lupin. So it looks like there's a comment that I believe the February hike is the same day as the Conservation Symposium at the Santa Barbara Botanic Garden.
I'll look for a possible other date in February then.
David, you were your internet wasn't working all that great just then, but what were you saying, that maybe you would look at other dates?
Yes, I'll look for other possible dates in February so that it doesn't conflict with the symposium.
Okay. So folks, just keep looking at our website for updates for our February events, both the talk about the new California native installations at the Ventura Botanic Garden, and the upcoming hike in February that isn't quite settled as to date and place. So, and mark your calendars for our plant sale in April and the wildflower show that will follow it the next day on the Sunday. So all of those things will be updating you both in the newsletters that Carolyn puts together, the email blasts, and the website.
Our April meeting is going to be Kathy Rose and her photographer, and they're going to be talking about their book on I'm going to forget. The
On a conifer, correct?
The bristlecone pine area.
Bristlecone pine, okay. So unless anyone else has a comment or a question, I think we'll go ahead and wrap this up.
Yes, I just wanted to say thank you, Mary. That was a great study. It really illustrated what's going on out there.
Yeah, thank you, Mary. It was very
You're
impressive.
welcome.
We really appreciated your doing this for us this
Mm.
month. So
Thanks again for listening.
Hey, Mary. This is Pete. Quick
Hi.
question for you. Great job on everything. There was a little, like a bobcat one that you had in there. It looked like it was a video.
Yeah.
Do you happen to have that video to share? I'm
Yeah,
interested in what
I
that looks
do.
like.
I could try to find. I had a few videos of the bobcat, so there's somewhere located in like a box folder that I
Okay.
could try to find and maybe send along to someone.
Yeah,
so
that'd be
how
great.
would you guys get in touch with each other?
I can put my email on there on the
Okay.
chat.
Yeah, sounds good. If anyone else wants it, feel free to add your email.
I would, yes, thank you.
Okay,
Thank you,
so
Mary.
those
Appreciate it.
people, so there's Pete's email, Mary.
Okay.
And Leslie, if you want to see it, also you should put your email in the chat.
You can also send it to me directly if you don't want everyone seeing
Do
it.
they have your email?
Yeah. And I can put my email in the chat in case anyone has any follow-up questions.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you, Mary.
Yeah, thank you again.
Thank you, Mary. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Okay, so any other questions or comments? All right, so everybody, why don't we thank Mary? Either with little virtual clappings or go ahead and thank you very much, Mary.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Bye, everyone.
Bye, you
Thank you, everybody.
guys. Thank you for coming.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay.